Gary Barksdale, you are a mayoral candidate for the city of Norman, and we are going to give the people an opportunity to get to know you better through more than a 30-second soundbite, a little conversational approach to these questions, which have been posed by former council members who should know what they're talking about. So, the first question is your style of leadership. What approach would you take if you're elected? Would you be one of the kind of elected officials that considers themselves a part of the team, and once they're a part of the team, that's how they represent their constituents? Some other officials view themselves as a person who is not a part of that government team, but is a member of the citizenry that represents the wishes of the citizens to the permanent staff, or others still view their role as an elevated member of staff, which is a conduit from the city to the public. So which of those do you think best describes the kind of elected official you'd be?
Well, Tom, I'm glad you asked that question. It looks like an A, B, or C question. I'm going to answer it with a D.
Okay.
Because my experience has always been that I like to consult with other people whenever I make a decision. So in that respect, more of a team player. Now to address the whole citizen advocate aspect, that I believe is the sole purpose that I've been called to do this, is to represent the voice of the citizenry. All right. So in that respect, yes, I would probably view myself more as that type of a leader, someone that represents the voice of the citizenry. But to play a part of a team, and not just the team of the elected officials, but teams of professionals and experts that would have input to that decision-making process. And then, of course, as an elevated I can't remember.
Elevated member of
staff. I've always kind of seen that as a form of elitism, but seeing it in terms of a conduit between the citizenry and the elected team makes that a little bit more palatable to me. But I've never viewed myself as an elitist, coming from a common background, a working class family, long line of Normanites that have just worked hard in this town and worked hard for this community. I see myself more as just your average kind of a guy that just happened to work my way through life to get to the position that I am, and that position that I serve at the university. I'm elevated because I have to share with students, concepts of calculus and mathematics. And in that respect, I sometimes tend to view things a little bit more black and white and with a little bit more truth, because mathematics is so cut and dry. It's, regardless of how you feel, regardless of your ethnicity or your gender or how you identify yourself, no matter what, the derivative of the function 20x squared is still 40x, all right? And so no matter what. And so that there's a certain element of truth in everything, but to explore that truth through working as a part of a team, through consulting with the citizenry, and as being that ear over here for the citizenry and that ear over here for the team, I think it would be hard for me to narrow it down to just one of those. I think that my decision-making process and leadership.
Overall, would you say you would, in summation, be more of a person who represents the city to the people, or to the people to the city?
People to the city.
Okay.
Absolutely.
This goes to the relationship with staff. The charter explicitly denotes roles for all council members. How do you view your role as a council member with regards to the city manager's staff?
Well, knowing that the city manager happens to be the only employee of the city council, but yet understanding that the city management staff, they manage the city. I don't know about the minutia of the operations that the city management engages in. I worked for the city. I worked for the city street department years ago, but that was pouring concrete and making curbs for the for the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, and I worked for the Parks Department. I've never worked for the police department, and I've never worked for other city maintenance divisions. So the trust there of city management and city maintenance has to be there, and so I think that that my relationship with them would be one of trust.
Great. And there's also a role for the mayor, because we have a council manager form of government, not a strong mayor form of government. So how do you view council's interaction and role of the mayor with the council?
Council and role of the mayor? Well, since the mayor is just another member of the council, and of course, is in relation to the answer earlier, is that I don't see myself as in any type of an elevated status. I just see myself as just running as a council member at large for the entire city, but that relationship with the council, from what I've observed and from what I have read, has to be a relationship still of supervisory type over the city council, but yet not dictatorial type over the council.
Very good. If you are elected to be the voice of your constituents in Norman's inclusive community, how would you approach a controversial issue? Would you vote with your personal beliefs or your constituents' preferences?
That's interesting again, because I don't think that's that much of a this or that answer. My decision-making process involves several things, especially when I'm dealing with a difficult decision. Difficult decisions in my life and in my job and everything like that always involves thoughtful prayer and reflection. Always. It involves thoughtful prayer and reflection. It involves communicating with people and getting input from them, those that would be affected by it. But as a controversial decision at the city level, I would be more inclined to listen to my constituents. I can remember a decision that was made a number of years back by a city council member by the name of Dan Quinn, where he stood up and he said, regardless of my personal beliefs on this issue, I have to make a decision based upon what my constituency's wishes are. And the bottom line is, I don't represent me. I would be representing the citizens of Norman. But of course, I'm also bound by a value system that's been entrenched within my being since I can remember.
So if you came to that crossroads, and we have to know that one of the reasons why they elect people to be in office is people don't always have the time to go through the inch-thick agenda book every 2 weeks and to attend all the meetings and get all the information to make the informed decision. So could you envision a circumstance where the preference of the public may be based on lack of information or miscommunication, and therefore how would you then try to affect that, or would you try to affect that?
Yes, I would try to affect that. In fact, the most recent decision that the study session had come to a conclusion of, based upon exclusively Mr. Mesano's input, it was based upon fear and lack of information. My knowledge base had already determined that this was a decision that was being based upon fear, and actually in a little bit of obfuscation as well. But that's one instance right there where, actually what they're saying demonstrates that they don't really have a knowledge of this issue, and I actually do. And, just by making a couple of phone calls and saying, hey, would you watch this study session as well, and get the feedback from some others that have a like interest that I had concerning the animal ordinance that came up. And it was clearly obvious that a minority of individuals were expressing an opinion on something that they really didn't have any knowledge about.
Okay. And trust is an essential part of governance. Without trust, it's hard to accomplish anything. How will you build trust in the community?
Trust Trust has a basis upon integrity. Am I going to do what I say I'm doing? Do I look to others as having integrity? Integrity has always been an important virtue in my family. It's been instilled ever since I was a kid, that you can trust somebody that has integrity. And I want to be that guy that people look to and say, hey, this guy's got some integrity. He's got some experience in his own personal life, his own demons that he's overcome. He's successful in what he does, in spite of the fact of what he's gone through, and that I've never been, well, since my conversion in my life, I've never been questioned as to whether I am not a guy that does what I say. And so I hope that the citizens of Norman see that, I'm going to do what I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do.
And the citizens of Norman have tools for transparency called the Open Records Act and the Open Meeting Act. Do you feel like those are important, and how do you feel like your role as a mayor should interact with making sure that they're followed?
I love the fact that every one of our meetings are televised. I love that. It occasionally some things, citizens, informed citizens have to really explore what's actually going on. For instance, with the recent ordinance, a lot of us had no idea that this was happening, because there were some small study sessions that weren't really, yes, they're televised, but there wasn't a lot of information out there that this study session was going on, and they were specifically addressing this. The Open Meetings Act has to be followed. Now, if accessing those records requires an exorbitant amount of manpower, then I think that there should be some type of compensation to the individuals that are having to do that. That it's not something that we should say, okay, we're going to have people freely accessing these records. That maybe we can, that our Open Meetings Act, and I'm talking about the recent instance with the billing for the open records, that we can actually do that similar to what the court does. That whenever a court has an in-camera review of records, then that way there's supervision as to the access of those records. Those records should be accessible to people that want to see those records. That's the bottom line. But when you have too many people tinkering with those records, then it's easy to make adjustments to those records, or removals from those records, or redactions in those records. So to have something similar to what the court has, an in-camera review of evidence, I think would be ideal.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.